Every now and then, a person may come across a band or a musician that mesmerizes them, captures their imagination, and inspires them like no other. And for me, that band is none other than Black Sabbath. Formed in Birmingham, England in 1968 under the name the Pocatello Blues Band and then Earth, until finally settling on the name Black Sabbath after the 1963 Mario Bava horror film of the same name, Black Sabbath is quite easily the first ever metal band, and therefore the godfathers of the heavy metal genre. It all began when guitarist Tony Iommi, on his very last shift working at a welding factory, lost two of the tips of his fingers in a freak accident, when a huge sheet of metal crashed onto his right hand, severing the tips of his ring and middle fingers, ultimately disabling his note-playing hand.
And I got my hand in, it just went straight down. And of course, as I pulled my hand back, I took the two ends off. So after that happened, of course, that blew everything. I was just devastated.
Yet, despite the tragedy, Iommi was deeply moved and inspired by legendary guitarist Django Reinhardt, who had his note-playing hand paralyzed in a fire. As a determined guitarist, Iommi would create his own prosthesis of rubber and bottle tops, which would then be applied to his two fingers, making it harder to play normally, which enabled him to lower the tuning of his guitar to get a more raw, heavy, and distorted sound, making it much easier for him to play. Ultimately, after discovering the dark and heavy sound, a band composed of Iommi on guitar, Geezer Butler on bass, Bill Ward on drums, and eccentric bipolar slaughterhouse worker Ozzy Osbourne on vocals took shape. One day, Ozzy had presented Geezer Butler a book written in Latin from the 15th century centered on black magic and Satan worship, as a gift knowing full well that Geezer himself dabbled in the occult and witchcraft. On that very same night, however, Geezer had awoken from a horrible nightmare to see an imposing dark shadow figure peering over to him at the foot of his bed, creepily staring at him.
It's like a black, malevolent thing. It's a horrible feeling of it. And I just totally freaked out. And I told Ozzy about it, and he came up with the lyrics to Black Sabbath. What is this that's
Iommi's heavy and intimidating sound, coupled with Geezer's terrifying experience, directly led to the 1970 eponymous debut album, Black Sabbath, which combined blues and jazz influence with heavy distortion and lyrics charged with darkness and gloominess. And that is where we are now. But before proceeding to the actual track listing of the album and going over each and every single song individually, I think it's important to note a few key features about this album. The first is the most obvious feature, the album cover. It has quite easily one of the most haunting and creepy album covers of all time, with a freakishly demented, yet eerie, sickly-looking figure in a black cloak gawking right at you. The identity of the woman was actually unknown for exactly 50 years, until she was discovered to be a woman by the name of Louisa Livingstone, who's actually a musician herself. The album's budget was only actually about $600, and it took the band only 12 hours to even record everything in one day, making it technically, I guess you can say, a live album. Okay, now time for the track listing. The technical order that I usually go by, and the order of which I will cover the album in, is Black Sabbath, The Wizard, Behind the Wall of Sleep, NIB, Evil Woman, Sleeping Village, Warning, and Wicked World. Unfortunately, the European version actually doesn't include Wicked World, but rather Evil Woman, whereas the North American version includes Wicked World as opposed to Evil Woman. However, in the Black Sabbath album deluxe edition, both Evil Woman and Wicked World are included. And now, in order, let's dive into each track respectively. Of course, we begin with the title track, Black Sabbath, which is not only the first song on the album, but also the titular song on the album, of course, and really the first heavy metal song. Not every genre can really do that. You can't really designate where a certain genre starts half the time. But with heavy metal, you certainly can here, which makes it certainly rather distinctive. The song opens up with a very foreboding and ominous combination of Heavy Rain and the Death Bell, which then transitions to Tony Iommi's tritone riff. Now, the tritone was actually banned in medieval times for sounding so evil and demonic, earning the moniker the Devil's Interval or the Devil's Third. And honestly, Iommi really perfected that here. I also absolutely love the lyrics. What is this that stands before me? Figure in black, pointing at me. turn around and try to run, find out I'm the chosen one, which is brilliant. And what's also brilliant is subsequently Ozzy screaming at the top of his lungs, oh no, as if his life was flashing before his eyes, which is awesome. And then you have Ozzy basically screaming to God because he's practically in hell, at least that's one way to perceive the song. And then Iommi tops it off with a very, very nice guitar solo, which honestly sounds so charged up and powerful, yet at the same time kind of mellow and demonic. Really, really interesting stuff, and that is one of the best things that Black Sabbath really perfected in the very beginning, was to make their music just sound as melancholy yet as frightening as possible. This is really a horror film put to music, this song. Number 2, The Wizard. Now, this song is rather interesting because while Black Sabbath, the previous track, can be cited as the first heavy metal and the first doom metal song of all time, you could very well argue that The Wizard can very well be the first folk metal song of all time. Whenever I listen to it, I always imagine a dark fantasy type world filled with malicious elves and dark wizards. The hook is actually probably the most pronounced and noteworthy facet of the song, really, because it begins with a harmonica, which you don't really hear often in metal overall, which Ozzy Osbourne was actually playing. And I love the way the harmonica actually harmonizes and manages to do so with the guitar. It sounds so dark, yet so kind of jolly, and it's such a bizarre combination, but hey, it works. The breakdown at about the 1 minute and 6 second mark is probably my favorite part of the song, really only because it goes from this wonderful harmonica harmonization with the guitar to a very dark breakdown. All I get from the song is darkness and wizardry and black magic. And of course, black magic is a theme that Black Sabbath would really naturally stick to throughout much of their discography. I think J.R.R. Tolkien fans might appreciate this. Number 3, Behind the Wall of Sleep. This song is actually based off of the H.P. Lovecraft short story Beyond the Wall of Sleep, about a deranged mental patient who sees very bizarre dreams. And when listening to the song, you kind of feel that same sort of insanity that Lovecraft evoked in that story. Now, this song, as with the preceding songs and the subsequent songs, are grand, especially because of Geezer Butler's bass line that you hear all throughout the song. The opening is very charged up and powerful. It doesn't have a slow build-up at all, it just delves right into it, and it succeeds at that. Geezer and Iommi work so well together to the point that, honestly, it's really no surprise that they've kept going for so long. One thing to note about this song as well is you can really deduce the jazz and blues influence that Black Sabbath was actually going for initially and wanted to implement into their style. And it's such a really interesting combination, hearing the distortion as well as that kind of bluesy, hard rock feel, which is actually rather interesting, and it's a formula that I don't really see utilized that often, but it worked, especially in the late 60s and early 70s, but even today, it still holds up. There's also a great deal of repetition in this song as well. How Ozzy sings about how your body is slowly turning into a corpse is rather morbid and enjoyable at the same time. And you also gotta love the wordplay here. Chill that numbs from head to toe, icy sun with frosty glow. Great imagery. Of course, this track serves as an opener for the next track on the album, NIB. And NIB is quite easily most people's favorite song on the album, and when you listen to it, it's really no surprise why. Firstly, Geezer's bass line and bass solo in this track, in the opening and throughout, is everything. It's so addicting to listen to, at least for me, and to a lot of other people I would imagine, to the point that that alone warrants a listen to this song. I truly wish we heard more bass solos in not just metal, but music in general. I think that'd be really refreshing. Another part about the song, and really the most compelling part of it, is the narrator himself, and that being Satan. Now I have you with me under my power. Our love grows stronger now with every hour. Look into my eyes and you'll see who I am. My name is Lucifer, please take my hand. The song is about Satan falling in love. In fact, this woman that Satan has fallen in love with is so beautiful to the point that apparently Satan is finally becoming good and benign as opposed to malign, which is interesting. However, the general conflict of the song is Satan actually falling in love and becoming good? Or is Satan just being deceitful and duplicitous as always? It's really up to the listener, and it truly makes the song rather riveting from start to finish. Oh, another thing about NIB also is that for a very long time, Black Sabbath fans and metal junkies have essentially said that NIB is an acronym for Nativity in Black. However, the band maintains that it actually had more to do with Bill Ward's facial hair at the time, which looked a bit like a pen nib. So whatever, it's a great song. Evil Woman. Now, like many other Black Sabbath fans, I actually didn't even get to the final 4 tracks on the album for a while, because largely I was just so fixated on the first 4 tracks on this album. But I honestly really regret that, and I highly recommend this song and the songs that follow. Now, this song is actually a cover from a band called Crow, which released a song a year prior to Black Sabbath's cover. And this song is rather interesting because it's definitely one of the catchiest of Black Sabbath's entire discography, especially with Ozzy Osbourne's lyrical repetition, "Evil woman, don't you play your games with me," and so on. It's very interesting, and it does get you a bit pumped up, I would say. But overall, it certainly is very interesting to see where Black Sabbath was essentially drawing inspiration from as they were compartmentalizing as a band and just trying to find their own style from covering songs of this nature. Sleeping Village. Now, this track is largely an instrumental, with the exception of the first 45 seconds or so in which Ozzy recites deeply cryptic lyrics, per usual. This track opens with a very peculiar yet oddly fitting mouth harp, which honestly adds a lot and definitely does reflect and complement the bluesy kind of atmosphere that Black Sabbath wanted to perfect here, except through darkness. I think the bass and guitar work is excellent, as is Bill Ward's drumming. The midsection is very funky, which is always a good thing. And as is the case with Behind the Wall of Sleep, this track, of course, serves as an opener to the subsequent track, that being Warning. Warning is a monster of a track. It runs a little over 10 minutes, about 10 minutes and 30 seconds or so, by itself, and usually you'll find versions where you have Sleeping Village and Warning together, because Sleeping Village syncs up so well with Warning. That's really the best way to listen to it all. Like Evil Woman, Warning is actually a cover as well, except this time from the Ainsley Dunbar Retaliation, who released their version a couple years before Sabbath as well. It begins very eerily. I like to equate it to hearing a train in a foggy and misty, wooded distance, if you will. Very interesting, very creepy and chilling, but this song has a lot to offer. There are portions that are very heavy with intense distortion, and there are more kind of mellow portions as well. There's also a very echoey type portion towards the end of the track, which is so eerie yet so nice. This song is, of course, a delightful mix between distortion and heaviness and more or less a mellow kind of bluesy sound, and really a delightful combination of the two, which makes it worthwhile, despite its very long runtime if you can handle it. It just never lets up, and the riff is one hell of a backbone. Number 8, Wicked World. Now, this track begins in a way that a lot of jazz music does. You have the drums, and then you have Tony's 59 Gibson guitar, which was really a special guitar. And you have Ozzy changing his vocal style, being a little lower, yet also being a little more assertive. It's a very interesting song. And then you have Geezer and Ward. Ward's drumming in this song is something else, something to behold for sure. You can really hear it throughout the entire song. And it's a really dark song as well. It talks about the evil of politicians and how people are dying of curable diseases and how people are constantly and really continuously manipulated. It's a really interesting song, and it really paints a very dark and decrepit world, making it highly relevant, really, in any decade. The song also has a very apocalyptic feel, which Sabbath would work with in the albums to come as well. Oh, and that ending is very short, but very chilling, to put it bluntly. Okay, that was a bit of a roller coaster, but I think I'm ready for the most difficult part, and that is ranking them. How do I rank these songs? I love each and every single one of them, to the point that this is actually rather challenging for me. But honestly, and this is strictly my opinion, but let's be honest, with every album, there are songs that are weaker than others, and of course songs that are stronger than others. That's natural. For me, personally, the weakest may have to be Sleeping Village, really only because it's a good track, don't get me wrong, but you really can't listen to it without Warning following it up, because Sleeping Village just syncs up so well with Warning to the point that it really defeats the purpose if you listen to it by itself. And I'm only really saying this because I've seen versions of Sleeping Village which are unconnected to Warning, which is fine if you want to experience it all by itself, but you really have to have both, because that would just only make sense. Number 7, Evil Woman. Number 6, Wicked World. I will be a little rapid fire here only because these songs, as catchy as they are, and I do go back to them willingly sometimes, they're just not as strong as the other songs on the album, and of course we know what those are. Of course, Wicked World is a little higher than Evil Woman because I just love that 59 Gibson sound from Iommi. It just sells it for me. Number 5, Behind the Wall of Sleep. Great song, great feel, great atmosphere implemented, and really good opener for NIB. Number 4, The Wizard. This one is higher because of its complexities. I love the harmonization between the harmonica and the guitar, and the imagery involved is killer. How there's an evil wizard essentially controlling everything and being so powerful to the point that even the most evil of entities fear him. Very metal stuff. Number 3, Warning. This song has so many layers and offers so much in terms of variety to the point that it made it into my top 3. I have fallen in love with this song every single time I've listened to it. And Ozzy's vocals are haunting. You have very mellow portions of the song. And then my favorite part of the song, I would say, would be kind of towards the end, around the 8 minutes, 9 seconds mark, where you have Iommi's guitar and his little solo, and then that kind of echoey feel that you get after listening to the 40 seconds that follow. Then you have the breakdown. The distortion in all of that is just grand, and I highly, highly enjoy that. Number 2, NIB. Of course it had to be NIB. I mean, you have the conflict, you have essentially Satan falling in love, but if anything, if Satan is deceiving the woman, he's certainly doing a very good job deceiving the listener as well. I love Geezer's bass line here. He delivers so much on every single album that he plays on. The same thing with Iommi and really everybody. But his bass line in the beginning, and when you listen to the version live as well, it sticks with you, even if you aren't actually there in person to experience it. Number 1, of course, has to be Black Sabbath. I may be a bit biased because this was actually the first Black Sabbath song I ever listened to. And I'm happy it was, because this song told me everything I had to know about the band. I remember it being a very overcast day. It was daytime, of course, but because it was so overcast and a little rainy, everything was so dark. I was home alone, and I've heard of Black Sabbath, but I never really gave them a proper listen. And I put on my headphones, and I decided to look up what their first album was, and I put on the first song. Sure enough, of course, it was Black Sabbath, and with the rain and the death bell and the tritone and Ozzy singing "Oh No" and screaming to God as if his life depended on it, it blew me away. So that about wraps it up. Gave my general consensus on all the songs, and I ranked them. Now, of course, you don't have to agree with me. If anything, down below in the comments, write your own ranking of the songs and share your own thoughts on the album as well. Now, I'd like to do one last thing though, and that's actually go over the album itself in terms of the vinyl record form, of course. The vinyl looks really uniformed from front to back, and I just love the overall atmosphere that it gives off. The location is actually a derelict watermill in Oxfordshire, England, just an hour northwest from London. The album's art has such a distinctive autumn feel that just reeks of a sense of melancholy eeriness and a overarching mystery. It feels lonely yet frightening, and I love the bird, which I didn't even notice until just recently. On the inside, we have the name of the band as well as an inverted cross, which the band actually never really liked or condoned, according to Bill Ward. The vinyl record itself is incredibly nice. I love the spiral, and it works so well when you actually play the vinyl and see it spinning, as if it was from the Twilight Zone intro. On side B, we naturally have the track listing, and of course, since this is the European version, Wicked World is not included. It plays well, and I highly recommend getting it. So that's that, the eponymous 1970 debut album from Black Sabbath. I would really mostly recommend this album to people who are just getting into Black Sabbath, or really want to get into Black Sabbath, because this album set the standard and established what the band would ultimately be known for. The overall darkness associated with the band, and really just warning the world of the evils everywhere. Their entire history, and especially with this album, is so cunning and intriguing, it just blows my mind. And you know what? We're only just getting started, because next time we will be taking a look at the Black Sabbath album, which basically everybody has listened to, at least in some capacity, and that being Paranoid. But until then, stay safe, and thank you for watching.